Welcome back to another episode of Jason's Life in 5. Today is Saturday, May 23rd, and I am in the historic town of Eureka, Utah. Now, you may say, if it's so historic, why have I never heard of it? But I promise you, there's a lot of cool things that have gone on here in the town of Eureka. It's, in the last number of decades, fallen on harder times, but I think there's kind of an effort to bring some of it back, and we're going to kind of explore some of that history and kind of see why this is such a neat place. And I'm inviting you to come along with me to check out Eureka, Utah. Now, for most people, I think they're going to come through to visit Eureka from the east. They're going to come from like the interstate, out by towards Provo, and head west out here. And when you come into town, you see some of the modern buildings, the school and that, but this is really kind of the first historic building that jumps out at you. This is actually the original LDS chapel, or Mormon church. It was built in 1902, and up until the 70s, it actually served as a functioning church building. In the 80s, it says on the plaque that it was restored by a family, and it looks like there's a building behind it, so it looks like it's a private residence at this point. The plaque that's posted was for 1988, so even that might have some outdated information as far as, what it is today. I've noticed that as I've seen some of the other plaques through town, but kind of a neat thing that they've gone through, and, they've done some restoration. It talks about how on the windows they restored some of those and some of the other stuff. So really kind of a neat building that leads you down into the rest of the old town. As you continue down the street, most of the historic buildings appear to be on the left hand or the south side of the street. You see buildings of different state. You see some like this. Looks like it's an old, maybe garage repair shop. You can see honk for service written on there. But you can see it's definitely seen better days. But as we continue down, you'll see that there are others that either have been preserved, restored. Some are in the process, it looks like, of being restored. So it's an interesting place. Next, we have the Eureka Methodist Church. This one appears to still actually be functioning. It has signs out talking about Sunday services and Tuesday meetings as well. So it definitely looks like it's seen its share of wear, but looks to still be functioning. Now this next building, this one appears to be the old post office. Well, maybe it's the new old post office, because further down is actually the original post office. But this one is actually a motorcycle museum that has been converted into. So I think we're definitely gonna have to go in and check this one out. There's a sign there that says 1922, which is funny. That's the year that Eureka is noted for being the biggest producer of silver in the United States that year. So it's got quite a history and an important place. But let's go in and check out the post office. Interestingly enough, they have tried to preserve some of the artifacts to the building's postal history. So you can see some of the old stamps and, some of the equipment of the day, intermixed with different motorcycle attire. Back here you've got the old mail vault, interspersed with more motorcycles, of course. In the main room here, they have a really impressive collection of different bikes, motorcycles. Even there's an old bicycle in here that I think it said is like from 1904 or something like that. It's really, really a neat collection to come and see. And all of this is free to the public to come to. Definitely a neat thing to stop in. Heading back down Main Street, we start to run into buildings that maybe aren't as cared for as the post office, we'll just say. You can see they're in all kinds of levels of disrepair. Some of these, it looks like there might be people trying to work in them, maybe restore them, save them. But some of them looks like, maybe it's beyond help. You definitely need to take a look in the windows of these old buildings when you go by, because you never know what you're going to find. Sometimes you see little hidden gems that you might miss otherwise. little bit further down the street, we come across the Tintic Mining Museum. Now, Tintic is the name of the mining district here. So if you see that as opposed to Eureka, that's kind of what it's referencing. But they do have a museum here that you can go in. I believe it's just open on the weekends, starting like noon to 4, something like that. And I can see the doors open. When I first came through town, it wasn't. So we'll go in here and check it out, and maybe we'll find out a little more history. Now the museum, it says depot over the door, and it does look like an old train station. Maybe we can find out a little more as we explore. As you come into the train depot or the museum now, they've got a collection of some of the minerals and ores that are mined here. And then along the top here, they actually have these helmets that were used by the miners. And it's kind of interesting to see how they've gone from the candle up to electric lights. And definitely a different kind of person that would have to do that job, in my opinion. This part of the museum is dedicated to leisure time, we'll say, for the miners. You've got, some gambling, drinking, the sign for a massage parlor. That wasn't authentic to the area. But they have this old, cool slot machine. And it does still work, he said. But he said the state frowns upon using it. Now, I thought this display is pretty cool because it's a miniature of the mine, and you can see what it's like underground. After they hollow out where they have dug out materials, they reinforce it with floors and beams, and really a neat thing. Then they've got some old pictures of some of the old miners that worked in the area. Really kind of lets you see what those old rugged frontiersmen really, what their life was like. In this room they have a collection of items really just donated from the whole mining district. And it's really kind of interesting to see some of the stuff in here. I mean, look at this jar of Skippy peanut butter. It looks like it still has peanut butter in it. I wouldn't recommend eating it, but it's just so cool. I mean, Diet Pepsi Cola, just decades of history and interesting items. This is really, really cool. They have this cool photograph of the old JC Penney that was in town, and they also have the original register from the store.
What the customer was purchasing. So I'll set it to, they were purchasing coal for their home. And you would put in the denominations by hundreds and thousands of how much they were charging. And then you would run the receipt. And out the door.
Wow. We've got a panorama shot of Eureka. You can see down here is down at the edge of town. We'll go down and check that out in a minute. Still standing today. And then over here is the old Main Street where we're at today. So we're on a tour and we're going to go in the old City Hall. The current one is down the street, but this one is now part of the museum, so we're going to check it out. And this is the old sheriff's office, right as you come in the building. He said that this is actually still a city-owned building. So this room upstairs is dedicated to the historic school. You can see those old-timey desks. You can see the teacher looks like she's had enough. This room across from the school room is meant to capture what the everyday life was for residents of the early 20th century. And you can definitely kind of sense that when you look at some of the items in here. Down the hall in the upstairs portion is the old courtroom. And here you can see lots of historic items from the area. This is pretty cool. They have a model reconstruction of kind of the old Main Street here. Definitely a little more bright and fresh than the current city. So many different cool old items from the past. Really, really just kind of a neat time capsule. He was telling me there used to be a movie theater, and these chairs are from that. They actually have the projectors, he said, in one of the storage facilities. But unfortunately, it caught fire in, I think, the 60s and burned down, so just a few remnants left. Another thing they pointed out is this is from the city register. And if you look, these are from 1896, and it's kind of funny they have it set to this page. You can see this person ran a building, and then these were the employees that worked for her. You can see that she was a location of ill repute, shall we say. But they came and they paid their fines or taxes, I guess, for their job. And it's kind of one of those situations where really kind of the sheriff looked the other way. They just collected the money. And as the tour guide told me, that if the sheriff did arrest them, the next day he would not be the sheriff. So one of those, I guess, needs in a mining community. So this is called an assay map, and it's got the topography, but you can see the different levels. And so this was meant to give kind of a 3D model of what was happening out here. It was made in the 1920s to take to the state fair, because people just didn't really understand. And so you can see, you know, the passageways for the mine shafts. Up here you have the buildings, that's what these squares are. And then the yellow lines are the topography for, you know, the canyon and that. So kind of a neat display. We're gonna go up behind City Hall, well, Old City Hall, and check out the Eureka City Jail. Maybe I didn't behave myself while I was in the museum, but we'll take a look here. So if you're lucky enough to get some accommodations, you got a cot and a chamber pot. So this was the old city jail, and it was constructed in, I think he said 1911. And I asked how late was it used. He said, I'm not 100% sure, but he said he thinks it was as late as the 80s, which, you know, when it's things I'm alive for, that seems relatively recent. So kind of a neat little look into history.
No, she didn't. Okay, we'll walk up on the way, because I'm actually, that's where I was thinking.
This here is the Gatley building. It used to be a bar, saloon. They actually have a well inside here, so we're gonna go check that out because they used that in bootlegging. They made moonshine and other illegal beverages, and they would keep them stored down in the well. And they even have a secret entrance that was connected to the bank next door because the banker was in on the business.
Friends in foreign countries that are minors can't afford to go, or it's dangerous, so wait till they come to U.S. and work for them.
Now there's a business run out of the Gatley building by a woman named Mary. She said her nickname is Crazy Mary. She said it's because she lives a different way than most, and she just has a lot of collections of rocks and different things that she's collected from the local area as well as around the world. She said she has friends from all over. She's lived kind of a different life, and it's kind of a cool little story. She's trying to renovate and restore and save the building. Next door is the McCormick and Company Bank. Now this bank was constructed in 1909 to serve as the McCormick and Company Bank. As of 1985, this was still a bank because that's when this marker was placed, and it says that the current occupant of the building is the First Security Bank. I don't think that's the case anymore, but it is kind of a cool building with a neat interior. Here you can see painted advertisement for Allen's Appliance Company. Unfortunately, doesn't appear to be much of an appliance store, but it looks like there has been some attempt to restore the building. It is kind of cool to see the efforts people are making to try to save the old historic buildings and the history here. The gentleman that took me on the tour of the museum said that, you know, the city's kind of been struggling with transitioning from an industrial city, which I don't think it's really probably been very industrial for a number of years, but trying to transition to more of a tourism, you know, with it being a small town. It's not very far. It's, you know, 48 miles, I think, from the Salt Lake City area is what my car said I drove. So kind of a neat little area, and it would be neat to see if this could kind of get some revitalization and, you know, kind of help save some of the stuff and bring it back to life. Now, the current name is Eureka, but I believe the original name was Ruby Hollow, if I'm not mistaken. But, you know, once there was the finding of minerals, kind of took off, and, you know, that actually is where the name came from. Someone found a big strike of silver in town here, and they said Eureka, and I guess the name kind of stuck. This building behind me on Main Street, this is actually the old Carnegie Library. It was built in the 1920s, and it now serves as the community center. From what I understand, the city is trying to gain funds to turn it back into a library, at least part of it. But right now, at least it's still being used, like I said, for community functions. But it's kind of neat to think that, you know, the town here was large enough at the time that they could support a Carnegie Library. Main Street is the historic Utah US 6 route. On the east side of the Elks Lodge, they have this old advertisement painted on the side of the building. Levi's waist overalls. This has seen a number of years. You can see a lot of fading up at the top. Norman Jensen Company, looks like. Now, seeing, you know, walls with this type of painted advertisement, these are definitely something that's very nostalgic. I think are really, really cool. And this is the side of the Elks Lodge. But if you come just around the corner, so on this lower level, on the corner of the Elks Lodge, this building here, this was the original Golden Rule, or JC Penney at the time. This is actually the second JC Penney store that they ever opened, right here in Eureka, Utah. So first one's in Kemmerer, Wyoming. That one is actually still there and active, but this one, it was active here for a while, and then it did close. There was another store that was here recently, the tour guide was telling me, but he said that unfortunately, with some recent changes and, you know, taxes and different things, the guys couldn't keep it open, and so now it's sitting here vacant. Just another piece of lost history. Even though the train tracks are gone and the train depot does not exist for the function of train travel, there is this cool old train car here, and it looks like it's open, so we're gonna come up and take a look, see if we can go in and check it out. Don't think that's in use. I'm not sure what this is, but it says it's a first aid kid. Is that like a little kid who's the doctor? I'm not really sure what the first aid kid is. But this is kind of a cool train car that you go through. And unfortunately, when you leave things open to the public, sometimes people, you know, like Green Rose or whoever that is, you know, they take advantage and ruin these things for people. But for the most part, this is in pretty good shape. It's kind of neat that this is here. You can just kind of come and see, because not everyone has gotten a chance to go through a train caboose, and now we have. As you continue through town, you come kind of to the west end of town, down the hill. You kind of come where you're coming out of town, but you come to the huge structure behind me here. This is the Bullion, Beck, and Champion Mining headframe. This is actually the only thing remaining from those original mining companies back in the late 1800s. And this used to be housed inside of a large building. It says, there's a photo on the display here I'll show you, but this was part of the equipment that they had designed to pull men, carts, materials that had been mined out of the shaft, because it looks like it's a vertical shaft that goes down. There's a fence all the way around it. You can see some people have knocked some of it down. I don't know that we're going to go and peer too deep into it, but maybe we get a little bit closer and take a look down in the shaft. But they've got a diorama here. It's kind of interesting to think that, you know, this is what lowered people down, and, you know, there were different levels and people were just down there working and trying to make a living. I'm not sure if you can tell the size of these beams, but they are incredibly massive. It's quite a feat to see this. It's, you know, I don't know that the camera's gonna portray the magnitude of this build, and to think that this was all inside of a covered building, is really a neat thing from the past, and it's kind of cool that they've been able to preserve this and kind of keep this as kind of like the key landmark, I guess, for the historic mining district that they have here in Eureka. So Eureka is one of these towns that has a lot of history, you know, really rich history for Utah, honestly. You know, it was back in 1910, it was the 9th largest city in the state of Utah. You know, on the tour, the guide told me that when it was on the ballot to determine the capital of Utah, there were 3 cities. There was Fillmore, Salt Lake City, and Eureka. So, I mean, it really was kind of a key place. And, you know, to see that it's kind of fallen on rougher times, but they're trying to save it, you know, really, I think is encouraging. Hopefully, you know, as they try to transition to tourism, it sounds like people are starting to kind of realize locally the importance of what that can bring. And hopefully it can be a success, because there's a lot of history here. Like I said, there was, you know, a lot of mining history, of course. You know, 1922, the most silver produced in the United States was here. Also, the most famous resident to ever come from here, arguably, I guess, you had Frank Zamboni. The inventor of the Zamboni was born in Eureka. So, you know, it's just one of those things where there's a lot of history, kind of a cool place. Now, there is one other site that I want to make sure we try to catch before we finish up our tour of Eureka, because there was something that happened in 1928 that I think was unexpected for sure, but kind of a big event locally. In 1928, Amelia Earhart had completed the first female transatlantic flight, and later that year she was flying from California back east, and she was having engine trouble. She found a field to land in nearby. When she landed, the field was too soft, and she actually ended up damaging her propeller. So she ended up staying in Eureka for 2 or 3 nights. Before she went up to Salt Lake, she got, you know, a new propeller ordered and that, but it sounds like she actually kind of enjoyed her time. She said she could go to Salt Lake when she was interviewed, but she's like, I'm gonna stay here for a couple days and get the rest and relaxation that I need. So another piece of history that probably just most people just do not know. So right up here in the neighborhoods, just above Main Street, is where we're going to find our next destination. All right, we've driven just up from Main Street, and this was the area where the Fitch family, I believe was the name, lived. This is actually where Amelia Earhart stayed for a couple of nights. There's a picture of her airplane parked right out here while it was waiting for repairs on the back of a truck, and you can see this house with those I guess the slanted roofs over the windows there. This would have been where her plane was parked, and this is where she stayed. It's kind of a cool thing to think that, you know, you have a celebrity that just kind of fell out of the sky and ended up staying right here for a couple of days. As we head back east out of town, you can see the T up on the hill there. That's for, I believe, the high school, Tintic High School. The gentleman at the museum said that this was actually the first location where they started the tradition of putting the letter on the hill. Now, it is something you see quite predominantly, especially through Utah. I think you might see it in some other western areas, Arizona, whatnot. And you will see it in cars, like if you go to Disneyland, even at Cars Land, you'll see RR for Radiator Springs. But this is supposedly where it started, at least according to the museum. The Tintic Mining Museum in Eureka. Now, one last thing I want to stop and look at before we wrap up the video today is just as we come out of town and go down the hill, it's, I don't know, maybe 5 miles down the hill, there was something I noticed when I was coming up that's part of the history that I thought might be kind of neat to just kind of check out. So we've come east down Highway 6, so the main street, through Eureka. You can see we're about 5 miles outside of town. And it's kind of cool because over here across the highway, you can see there's an old train bridge. And this is one of the lines that actually connected through that went up into Eureka. So the train goes into Eureka, is no longer there. That line's all gone. And the guy at the museum said that most of the train track, even down here, is not usable because someone came in and took all the spikes and a lot of the ties and stuff, I guess. But there is a remnant of the railroad. And I think it's kind of cool that this history is still here. You can see here, there used to be a tie in there. Now it's just an empty hole. So the railroad, this was the last bit that was usable, I guess. And it went up to, there's a mine that's still in operation right up there. I think he said there's still 3 in the area. And so that one was still actually in use. But you can certainly see that the tracks here, they just wouldn't be in use. You can see where there's a groove and the track kind of goes off and ends up going off of the side of the train track. So certainly not usable. And it's probably just going to slowly erode away into the annals of history and time. So, and that is probably a lot like this video. Gonna just go off into the ether and disappear. So that's gonna do it for today's episode and adventure out to Eureka, Utah. If you're ever, in the Salt Lake City area, you're looking for kind of some old, cool, historic places to go that are off the beaten path, this is definitely somewhere I would tell you to think about. And because there's a lot of cool things out here that, I think even a lot of locals don't know about. So that is going to do it for this episode. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time on another episode of Jason's Life in 5. Happy travels!